The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Mostly on good afternoon for all of you. Krishna Vedula here, and we are going to have another exciting webinar from our partnership series, partnership with Chitkara University, showcasing transformations. We have with us Dr. Rajneesh Sharma, who is the Dean of Research at Chitkara University, Chandigarh. And he's going to talk to us about a very interesting, very important and timely topic, because most of us in engineering colleges all over India, are trying to have conferences, international conferences for networking and for learning from each other. And so, it's, unless you have experience in doing that, sometimes it's very difficult to manage such a conference. And so I think it's very timely that Dr. Rajneesh Sharma is going to give us some tips on hosting international conferences. And he is, as I said, the Dean Research at Chitkara University Research and Innovation Network. He's also senior member of IEEE. He's a lead for the VLSI Center of Excellence and executive committee member of IEEE Delhi section. So thank you, Rajneesh, for taking the time to be with us. And I'm going to make you the presenter so that we'll see your screen and we can continue with the presentation. So here we go.
Thank you, Professor Krishna.
Yeah, here we go. Just show my screen and keep going. Yeah, great.
Yeah, hi. As Professor Krishna very rightly told, so whatsoever part of the world you are sitting in, so my greetings go to you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, Professor Krishna, for this nice piece of introduction. As Professor Krishna also rightly told, that a lot of institutes nowadays are trying to hold international as well as national conferences as well. And the basic goal for these conferences remains that everybody wants to do good networking, so as for the growth of their respective institutes. In the first slide itself, if we carefully see, the cursor is, there is something like advertise, best practice, sponsorship, customer experience, and brand. So when one thinks of organizing a conference, all these different aspects leading to the growth of the organization get into action, means those have to be taken care of. Before I formally start with the presentation, I need to go to the next slide. I need to acknowledge, especially first of all, my parent institute, Chitkara University. I have been associated with this great institute since last more than 11 years now, and it has been great working with them. And secondly, I must say that I have been formally associated with IEEE Delhi section as executive committee member, as Professor Krishna told in the introduction, as well, since almost about 1 year or so. And more than that, I have been a part of their standing committee for technical and professional activities, which means that any of the proposals in the states of Punjab, Haryana, Jammu Kashmir, Rajasthan, Delhi, all these regions, all these 5 states of India, if the proposal has to be submitted for any IEEE conference, so a copy of the proposal comes on my table as well for giving my comments that whether the proposal is good enough, it can be considered for a grant of IEEE brand to the conference or not. And in last about 18 months or so, my association in this particular committee, I might have visited, I might have viewed about, I think, more than 20 proposals. And that has been a huge piece of learning for me, that where institutes really do struggle in planning a proper conference. And so I thought, so it is good that this knowledge must be shared. And above all, I'm always grateful to Professor Krishna and IUCEE, especially. There have been so much of learning. My first association with IUCEE was in 2009 when I attended one Faculty Leadership Institute program, Infosys Mysore campus by Professor Felder. And before that, I used to feel that I am a great teacher. My presentation skills are good and everything, my bits planning experience, everything. But that single 3 days workshop really changed my thinking. There is so much to be learned as far as the teaching aspects is also concerned. So my thanks always goes to Professor Krishna for the same. So moving on. So this is what the agenda of the presentation is. Uh, uh, I see part of these slides have been taken in the very recent past. In August 3rd week, attended one conference leadership conference leadership program, which was organized by IEEE Reason 10. Means as attendees might be knowing, or if they don't know, I would like to apprise you of this fact that what IEEE has done is they have divided the whole world into 11 different regions. Asia Pacific, part of the Asia Pacific region is comes under Region 10, R10. So this particular conference leadership program was organized by R10. It was a 2 days program, and I was nominated by IEEE Delhi section to attend this. And so part of the presentation, part of the slides have been taken from there. But those are very, very important stats which I would like to share in this presentation. And then what should be the kind of motivation to run a conference for the different stakeholders? If we want to plan a conference, then what should be the kind of timeline which should be strictly followed so that everything falls in place and everything goes well? Then there are important goals for for organizing a well-planned conference. And then there are some planning tips. This all forms the agenda of the presentation. Next slide is very important, so I would really seek your attention on the same. See here, it is a very, very important slide. So if we see IEEE, everybody knows about IEEE, right? It's a great technical society, one of the largest technical societies of the world. And here are some relevant stats in respect to their conference business across the globe. So in 2018, last calendar year, IEEE sponsored total 1,966 conferences, which were organized in total 103 countries across the world. Now, when IEEE gets associated with a conference, there are two models. One is whether the conference is financially sponsored, where IEEE, even if IEEE has got say 5% financial stake to that conference as well, so it becomes a kind of financially sponsored conference. And this financial stake may vary from 1% to 100%. So there you will find some of the conferences which are completely financially sponsored by IEEE, and there are some other conferences as well, which is a different model where IEEE doesn't have any financial stake. So they don't get into your budget, they don't get into your finances, but then they will still like to monitor the quality of the conference. And if the conference is successfully held, then the proceedings of the conference will be published ultimately on IEEE Explore. And nowadays in India, especially, Scopus is a buzzword. It's a very, very big buzzword, a word which is in very high demand nowadays. So, and IEEE, whatever research papers finally get published on IEEE Explore, those go into Scopus indexing as well. So last year, around 1966 conferences were organized in 103 countries, which are out of which 997 were financially sponsored and 969 were technically co-sponsored. Technically co-sponsored where IEEE didn't had any direct financial obligation at all. Now, for organization of these conferences, they partnered with 1,400 non-IEEE entities. Likewise, say if a conference is held in say Chitkara University, and we typically organize it with without any financial stake coming in from IEEE, then we'll be falling in this bracket of 1,400 institutes. Now, in this 1,966 conferences, these are important stats. How many attendees were there? So 561,000 attendees were there, and 282,000 attendees were in the financially sponsored conference. I hope now everybody is clear about what is the difference between a financially sponsored IEEE conference and technically sponsored conference. So 282,000 attendees were from financially sponsored conferences, and 279,000 attendees were from the technically co-sponsored conference of IEEE. And important thing is, out of these 1,966 conferences, IEEE at the end of the calendar year acquired 1,893 conferences. Now, what does it mean that IEEE finally acquired these many number of conference proceedings? See, the IEEE makes sure that the proceeding of only that conference will go to IEEE Explore finally, for which the conference has met reasonably good and high quality standards. So it means 1966 minus 1893. So 73 conferences here were such which didn't meet IEEE expectations, and whatsoever papers were presented on those conferences, those didn't finally go to IEEE Explore. So which means one has to be very, very careful that even if it doesn't mean that even if so you have been able to get the technically sponsored or financially sponsored tag from IEEE, and that doesn't guarantee 100% that still the proceeding will be going to IEEE Explore as well. In fact, as a part of the this member of standing committee of IEEE Delhi section, nowadays we insist upon that when you what you mention on the website is, even if you mention that it's IEEE sponsored conference, you must mention this thing that only those papers which will be of high quality and will meet IEEE standards will be going to IEEE Explore finally. So so one needs to be careful on that. So whatsoever is there, so we need to maintain the high quality of the contents. And here is another important piece of stat. That's how this conference business has grown in last 6 years of time or so. So it has been on the in the path of growth. So around from almost around 1400 conferences in 2013. So as told in 2018, so the conferences almost around touching 2000, number of 2000 or so. And here is the clear kind of distribution as a, that how many of these conferences remain financially sponsored and how many of these conferences remain technically sponsored. As I told, IEEE divides the whole globe into 11 different regions, and we means India especially, India falls in region 10, and see the kind of number of conferences which have been organized by different countries falling in the region 10 in 2018. And out of the total number of conferences, India has, of course, organized maximum number of conferences of 130 conferences. So it gives the biggest chunk of the pie. China has organized 72 conferences, and the smaller countries like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka have organized 9 and 10 conferences respectively. So which this slide clearly shows that if India has organized 130 conferences in a calendar year of 365 days, so it means roughly after every 3 days, if we can say after every 3 days, there is a IEEE conference happening in some part of the country. So which means India is very, very aggressive on organizing IEEE conferences. This particular stats, and we need to be careful, this particular stat is only for those conferences which are sponsored by, financially sponsored or technically sponsored by IEEE. Besides that, in this business, there are other players as well. There is a big player, Springer. There is a big player, ACM as well. So many of the conferences, what we see nowadays is that Springer will promise, or Springer will give the formal approval that the proceeding of the conference will get published in Springer series of books, right? And similarly, ACM, although they are very, very strict again on the quality, but still, if it is an ACM sponsored conference, ACM gets associated with that conference, then the proceeding goes to the papers get published in the ACM proceedings or any of their journals. So what I mean to say here is 130 is the only number of IEEE conferences in India, and besides that, there might be many, many other conferences as well, which might be organized with some other flagship or other bigger brands as well. So number of conferences in the country is on a rise. It's indeed a very, very high rise. When you run a conference, when you organize a conference, the organizing, the sponsoring body, here say in IEEE, so they would like that the conference should be such which should further their vision. And the vision of IEEE is to benefit humanity, advancing engineering and technology, create forums for idea sharing and discussion, and then IEEE growth. So IEEE would obviously find that whatsoever conference is being organized, so that would help in promoting the brand of IEEE. In fact, during conference leadership program held in Goa, which I attended recently, the IEEE team was very particular that when anybody goes to these kind of IEEE sponsored conferences, they should get the field right from registration desk till valedictory, that they are attending a special event, and that feeling of greatness should be felt all across. So that kind of this is all about experience, and they were very particular that the brand IEEE should be felt all across, and at no cost that brand IEEE should be compromised while organizing a IEEE sponsored conference. Or for per se, we had organized in Chitkara, organized one conference in 2017, which was the proceeding of which was approved by Springer to go to. So we had a special guest from Springer as an observer, and they made sure that we do a good job in organizing in running that conference. See, when any conference, what are the goals and objectives for a organizational unit? Like I say, if Chitkara University is organizing a conference, what is our interest? So we want to build the skill of our own faculty members, of our own students, when they would be attending some of the great keynote sessions by the speakers coming to as a part of the conference, or they would be listening to the research work of some of the great researchers, latest research work. So they would be having a much better idea that what exactly is happening in a particular field. So if a conference is being organized in cloud computing area, and if say even there are 100 attendees as well, one can appreciate that 100 people working only in the area of cloud computing would be there in that particular campus for 2 or 3 days, whatsoever is the duration of the conference. So they would be discussing about their respective research areas, which is definitely good for the growth of any organization. So any organizational unit would be having a great interest that the experts from a particular domain visit their campus, and then that helps in training of their respective stakeholders as well, whether it is students or faculty members. Then individuals. What is the interest for an individual to attend a conference? The interest is obviously when you present a research paper, you get to have the feedback coming in from the experts in that particular area. Your research work gets published and you get recognized for your work. You connect with colleagues and the community. Especially, again, I took the example of cloud computing. Otherwise, how is it possible to meet that many number of people for of a particular domain? You can write n number of mails. Sometimes they will respond, sometimes they will not respond. But during those 2 or 3 days of the conference, all the people working in the same area are under one roof. So it's a great opportunity for collaboration, for networking, for further follow-ups, for getting feedback on your work, and so that you can also excel in your career. For especially for PhD students, for their postdoc positions, or for their further career enhancements, conference is a very good thing, which from individual perspective as well, which they must attend. I learned this thing here. I would like to say I learned this thing long time back. I remember my experience from 2014 WEEF, World Engineering Education Forum. In fact, latest World Engineering Education Forum was held in Chennai by VIT Vellore. 2014, I remember that was held by in Dubai and the hosts were American University of Dubai. I remember having an interaction with one of the professors from one of the US universities, that nowadays, and I'm talking of the conversation which I had 5 years back, that when nowadays the means of communication are immense, and it is not at all difficult to reach anybody. Means WhatsApp is there, and social media is there, and the emails are there. Then what is the need for actually organizing these kind of conference? And I remember his words; those are beautiful words. I still remember that very clearly. That when you interact on social media or on emails, etc., you form an association, right? But when you meet in person somebody while attending a conference, you chit chat with him half an hour, 1 hour, over lunch, over a cup of tea, you make a relationship, and relationships are long lasting, sometimes long lasting for your whole rest of the life. Associations are more of professional associations which last only till the time you are into that profession. The associations will be remaining, and after that, uh, uh, those cease to exist. So, if you really want to make relationships, then conference is a very, very good to be organized and simultaneously to be attended as well. Now, coming on to see when you need to run a conference, different aspects which one should definitely keep in mind. That is, what is the need to run a conference? Why do you want to run a conference? Why do you want to organize a conference? Uh, who is the audience? If at all you plan a conference, whether enough number of people would be are available in that particular field to attend the conference. And when you organize a conference, it is not one person alone who can organize such a big affair. It is very essential to identify, do you have a good team who can support you at times, for taking care of different aspects of the conference. Again, at Chitkara, what we usually do is we form the team in the very, very beginning. Who is going to take care of the transportation part, like, right, there is a transport committee. Who is going to take care of the accommodation part of the delegates? Who is going to take care of the, say, very important part, financial part of the conference? Who is going to take care of the publicity part of the conference? So forming a team of right people at right positions is very, very essential. Although there can be one convener, there can be one in charge who can lead the whole initiative, but then it is very, very essential that a team should be formed to take care of different aspects of the conference. Then who will you work with? At times it always happens that when you plan a conference, it is very important to prepare a budget. As it has been mentioned over here, you prepare a draft budget. In fact, at the time of when any proposal is submitted to IEEE daily section as well, there is a particular format, and budgeting a preparing a draft budget of the conference is very, very essential part of the conference. Many of the conference proposals get rejected only because they have not been able to visualize that what is going to be their expected income and what is going to be their expected expenditure. Many of the times, conference organizers will think that the registration fee is the only source of income coming in for the conference. That is not so. If you are organizing a big conference, then there is quite a chance you can approach a large number of sponsors coming in for the conference as well, who will give you money. You can apply for grants coming in from some of the government agencies as well, like as DST sponsors the conferences, CSIR sponsors the conference. All these agencies I'm talking which are in India. Then there are a few other agencies as the UGC sponsors the conference to some extent, partially. Even AICT also provides grant for organizing conference. So that all comes under your income. Nevertheless, thinking of income alone is not good, but simultaneously you must take care of that. What is the kind of expected expenditure which is going to happen for organizing an IEEE conference? We say that there has to be at least 20% surplus income over expenditure. Even if it is a 15% as well, which has been shown in the budget, that conference proposal goes for revision. That first plan your budget properly, only then the grant, only then the proposal will be recommended for possible association with IEEE. So same thing I would recommend to the potential conference organizers as well in future, that while preparing or planning the budget, please plan for minimum 20% of income over expenditure, and then accordingly plan with the rest of the things. Many times I have seen that while preparing the budget, so they will take care of the expenditures, like, okay, what is going to be in the registration kit? So there is going to be a bag, there is going to be a brochure, this and that, etc. They will forget the basic expenses, like when the keynote speaker is supposed to be invited, so his airfare is supposed to be taken care of, his accommodation is supposed to be taken care of. So how much expenditure is going to go toward the getting the best of the keynote speakers? So that should be taken care of. Toward branding, I would say branding is very, very important nowadays. So how much expenditure you are going to make on making sure that the branding part is well taken care of the conference. So in case anybody is really interested in having the standard Excel sheet for preparing a budget, I have done it myself for IEEE daily section. So that standard budget sheet is there with me. If anybody will request me, through Professor Krishna Vadula, through IUCEE, then definitely I would be very, very glad to share that Excel sheet where you just need an Excel sheet with all mathematical formulas included. You just need to feed in whatever are the basic details, and then the Excel sheet takes care of the rest of the budgeting part. Then timing. I do have a separate slide for the same, that what is the time when the conference, if the conference is supposed to be organized in in December 2021, means 1 year from today almost, then what is the plan that when one should start talking of the conference, and when, at what stage, what should be done. So one should be taking care of that. So when does this process begin? So if we have to organize a conference here in December 2020, we say one should start planning for the conference at least 12 to 18 months in advance of conference date for conferences less than 200 attendees. If the less than 200 attendees, at least 1 to 1.5 year is the time which should go for planning the conference. If it is less, trust me for this thing, if it is less, the conference may ultimately lead into a complete mess, and not be able, conferences organizers will not be able, conference organizers or delegates coming over will not be happy with the effort at all. It usually takes around 12 to 18 months. In fact, in IEEE, once you submit the proposal, the evaluation committee itself takes around 3 to 4 months of time in saying yes. And same has been our experience even with Springer as well. They took good 2.5 to 3 months of time in just saying yes to the proposal whatsoever you propose. IEEE or Springer in principle agree to get associated with your conference, and where you can use IEEE logo over there. And same as the experience with ACM as well, that they do take good amount of time in just saying yes. And when one prepares the conference proposal, it is a very, very detailed proposal, right from name of the conference, a name of the finance chair, name of the conference chair, name of the general chair, name of the technical program committee members, who all are going to be in technical program committee members, who are your potential reviewers of research paper. Budgeting I've already told, very, very important. In IEEE form especially, there is a in fact in Springer form as well, there is a great amount of detail asked that what kind of research culture is currently prevailing in the institute, whether sufficient number of research papers are already being published by the respective institute. So it means any Tom, Dick and Harry institute can't get the proposal approved from these big brands for organizing a conference. The institute has to have good amount of standing. Only then perhaps the proposal will be sanctioned by any of these big brands to get associated with the conference. So it's very clear later on as well. Submit IEEE conference application at least 12 months in advance. Then it stands the chance that rest of the aspects of the conference will be taken care of at good span of time. It's very important quote again. You can't manage it if you can't measure it. So it is very, very important. A good team led by a great leader should be able to visualize that what all is going to go into organizing this particular conference. How many, which field they are targeting. Is there any competition in that field? If you will plan a conference on 15th and 16th of December 2020, have a good survey done during similar time. If is any other conference not happening, which might be of even great interest to the audience. If you plan a conference, say on the similar days, so 15th, 16th December 2020, in the area of cloud computing, and then simultaneously you realize later that another big conference in the same area is happening, which has got a long standing, which is an old conference. So all the researchers working in that particular area will go to that conference. Nobody will attend this one. So the whole effort may go for a fiasco. So that has to be taken care of. So I again mean to say that it is very important that before one even conceives the idea of organizing the conference as well, so one should be able to get exactly these numbers very, very right. So some goal setting, some quantitative. So what is the likely number of papers which will be submitted? What kind of acceptance rate which you want to propose? Here as well, I would like to tell that from my experience of organizing conferences at Chitkara, we have been very, very, very high quality conscious, and usually we don't accept more than 25 to 30% research papers whatsoever we are received. So this is what our approach has been in the past. But again, in Goa, I learned IEEE doesn't stipulate any such condition. You can accept even say 90% papers as well, whatsoever you receive. IEEE will not ask you on that. But only thing, all those 90% papers should meet those standards, even if it is IEEE or Springer, whatever brand it is, but those should meet those standards. So as an organizer, you should be able to think that, or you'll be able to understand that how many papers are likely to be submitted in that particular domain, and what percentage you are going to accept. Because on this particular number, that which paper, how many papers you are going to accept, you are going to make the rest of the calculation on the budget part as well as the income part of the conference as well, because that will give you the lead that how much of registration fee you should be having. As earlier also told, any good conference should have at least should be planned at least with 20% of surplus income. So accordingly only, so you should expect that what is the registration fee which should be kept for this conference. Then how many are going to number of attendees? Are you going to have any exhibitors? Because exhibitors pay you money. They are kind of sponsors. And if you decide to have exhibitors, so they will pay you money, which will be going toward the income of the conference. Who are going to be patrons? Who are going to be reviewers? Who are going to volunteer? Yeah, very important, which I didn't forgot to mention about that. Since last 1 year or so, rather 1.5 years or so, earlier IEEE didn't choose to charge any fee, but since last 1.5 years or so, now they insist upon that minimum, not minimum, but mandatory 1,000 US dollar has to be submitted to IEEE if the proceeding has to be finally published in IEEE Explore. 1,000 US dollar as the conference association fee, and then $15 per research paper. So in case say you decide to submit 40 research papers which should be going to IEEE Explore, so it means the total expenditure which the conference should cater for is 1,000 plus 15 into 40, that is 600. So $1,600 should be kept aside, which IEEE alone will be taking for later indexing the papers in IEEE Explore. Similarly, IEEE Delhi section, in addition to this 1600, with the example which I took, IEEE Delhi section, in fact, all other units of IEEE as well in India, they do charge a sum of amount 400 US dollars. So it means while preparing the budget, the one major expenditures which the organizer should cater for is $1,000 mandatory, $15 per paper, plus $400. So that is the kind of mandatory expenditure which anyhow is going to happen while organizing the conference. Then some other things which should be taken care of is that whether you are going to call media also, what kind of social media activity you are going to engage. It is very important nowadays to provide proper branding to the conference and spread across a very strong message to the community working in that particular field, so that they feel like coming and attending this conference. Then especially any organizers now, any like I say, I brand would like that one of the major goal remains that when the conference is organized, so IEEE will be very much interested in the new membership should also be encouraged. Besides that, the other stakeholders, like what is going to the industry representation, whether it's any industry, you're going to have the keynote speakers coming in from the industry. Likewise, in one of our conferences which we organized last year, we had the vice president of NXP simulators coming in over for to deliver the invited talk. So who are going to, are you going to simultaneously organize activity related to oriented towards students as well? I remember when Professor Krishna Vedula organized the conference, ICTIEE. So there is a very special activity which is oriented only towards engagement of students, that is speed, which is a wonderful initiative. See, ultimately the goal of the conference always remains to engage the like-minded people working in the similar area for those 2 or 3 days of time, so that they can do good amount of networking and they can really excel in the field. Then there are some qualitative goal setting as well, which one should be doing, that who are going to the likely sponsors. So here the training and placement cell or the office of external affairs of any institute really helps a lot, because normally the conference organizers will be academicians, the professors who will be responsible basically in an organization for taking classes, but at times they might not be having good networking with the important stakeholders, likewise potential sponsor. So Office of External Affairs of any respective institute be of can great help. Are will there be any kind of hands-on sessions also being held during the conference, which might be very especially very useful for the students. Then see site tours is very important. At times, if somebody is coming from one part of the country and attending the conference altogether 2,000 kilometers away in the other part of the country or other part of the globe, then the site tours will become a very lucrative kind, I would say, carrot for the respective delegates to attend the conference. Likewise, some conference is being organized in Agra, so it is a must that a conference organizer should hold a trip to Taj Mahal as well. Similarly, we make it sure that if we are organizing conference in Chandigarh, we make sure that there definitely one sightseeing tour should be organized towards Sector 17, which remains of the Chandigarh, which remains the kind of heart of the city. So it's very important that the site tours should also be organized and should be taken care of while planning for the conference. When you plan a conference, so you need to develop a detailed conference plan, define the conference point of difference, what makes your event unique. Very important. Again, you need to be very categorically clear that how this conference is unique. If it is not unique, then trust me, for every single field there is already established conferences. It might prove to be a complete fiasco that the people may not turn up. Here as well, I would definitely appreciate efforts coming in from Professor Krishna Vedula. Again, I'm not buttering him at all, but I really appreciate his vision that he brought in a conference in the area of transformations in engineering education, that is ICTII. We were host to that conference in 2019 January, but that is a wonderful theme, because in that particular area the conferences had not been happening. There were conferences happening in the area of all aspects of computer science engineering or electronics and communication engineering, but there was no conference being planned for in the area of transformations in engineering education. So that conference has been a great success, and I wish that conference even a greater success in the future as well. Then again, talking is easy, right? But then thinking that whether when you think of organizing conference, whether you do have enough amount of infrastructure as well. In fact, nowadays when you bid to host a great conference, one of the important questions which the screening committee of the conference will ask you is whether you do have enough of infrastructure, whether you do have good quality air conditioned 7-8 rooms where the sessions can be held, whether you do have a good dining area where 400 to 500 delegates can easily have their food during the lunch or dinner breaks, whether you are in position to hold a good banquet dinner, whether all your lecture rooms are equipped with all modern multimedia facilities or not. So taking a good stock of good stock of the infrastructure available to you for organizing the conference, that should also be very essential part of the planning of the conference. Similarly, as I told, very important that you should do a rough exercise at how many reviewers you can have on board. Again, IEEE typically asks for, that is the mandatory requirement by IEEE, in fact by Springer as well, that each and every research paper submitted to this conference should be reviewed by at least 2 reviewers. So let me take a quick mathematical example. Say if the conference receives 100 research papers, so it means you should have minimum 100 multiplied by 2. So every paper is supposed to be reviewed by 2 reviewers. So 100 multiplied by 2, so 200 reviews you should be having. And IEEE further lays this condition that no reviewer should be allowed to review more than, although they said 12 papers, but IEEE daily section is even stringent on that we don't allow anybody to review even more than 5 papers as well. So it means if we go by that mathematics, so 200 reviews have to be secured for 100 research papers submitted to the conference. So 200 divided by 5, so it means you must have 40 reviewers on board to review those papers. Usually from experience, I can tell you that when mail for consent would be sent to these potential reviewers, so they would immediately say, yes, I would review the paper. But then when they have to actually work and they have to go through the manuscript of the research paper, give their comments and give the review, they will be reluctant. So I would safely say here, at least the rule of, rather I would say 2.5 times more should be followed. So if your calculation says that 40 reviewers should be good. You should go for planning minimum 100 reviewers. If you plan for 100 reviewers, 2.5 times more than required number of reviewers, then only perhaps you'll be able to get the reviews timely, and you'll be able to communicate the decision to the expected delegates of the conference as well. Financial planning, as I already told you, I have myself prepared a Excel sheet. If anybody really needs that, I would be very, very glad to share that Excel sheet for planning the budget. So that should be taking care of most of the concerns related to planning of the conference. The rest of the things which yeah, again, with all these big brands like IUCEE and sorry, IEEE and Springer, very, very particular about whether the copyright has been transferred to the uh, to the these agencies or not. If the copyright, if the authors fail to transfer the copyright to those papers, are not considered for publication on the IEEE Explore. In fact, related to quality of research papers, one thing which I'm forgetting, but very, very important, I should not have been forgetting, that is the quality. When we talk of the quality of the research paper, uh, the plagiarism check is very, very important. Nowadays all the papers are directly uploaded on IEEE or Springer portals only, so conference organizers don't have much of control on that. And then committee of IEEE or Springer screens those papers themselves, and typical guidelines say that if the similarity index or plagiarism is more than 30% in any of these conference, in any of the research paper, those papers are outright rejected. In fact, IEEE is even more harsh on that, on those such authors as well, that they will keep a kind of red flag against those names, and any future submissions are very, very carefully noticed or kept under a strict watch, that this particular author has involved himself herself into any kind of plagiarism. So all the research papers coming in from this author in future as well will be looked into very, very carefully. So potential conference organizers, again, request to all of you that while preparing the plan of the conference, while preparing the website of the conference as well, all these policies should be very clearly indicated to the potential authors, that they should strictly avoid plagiarism or from in their research papers. Otherwise, it is their direct loss, that if I typically blacklist them in the future, so their careers can be at stake. So careers regarding submission of research papers can be at stake. So one should be very, very careful in that. Then I already talked about the same, that identify partners. Likewise, in our one of the conferences, I'm again taking an example because this is the kind of hands-on experience of my hands-on experience. Likewise, we are organizing one conference in February 2019, for which nowadays the late submission track is open. Now the model of the conference is, this is a 4 days conference, but the model of the conference is 2 days. It is going to be held in Taiwan, 7th and 8th February, and 14th and 15th February it is going to be held in India, in Chitkara University campus. There the our partner is Chungcheng University, Chiai, in Taiwan. So total the number of the research papers are being received on the same portal. Finally, there is a huge list of reviewers. We are currently at that stage where the papers are being reviewed. In fact, for the next week we have planned a meeting of technical program committee as well. And in addition to these two hosts who are going to host these conferences and going to present an opportunity to the delegates to come and attend that conference, simultaneously we have been able to rope in the partners coming in from CDAC is one, right? Punjab Technical University Jalandhar is another partner. Punjab Engineering College Chandigarh is another partner, and there is one college even from West Bengal as well, which is another partner to this conference. So it is very, very important that more the merrier when it comes on to partners, because they are the ones who will help you in spreading a very, very strong message about the conference, and which will help you in getting more quality research papers for your conference. So which should be helping you in generating that, what I said earlier, 20% surplus in addition to whatever expenditure you are planning to make for the conference. In fact, there are many, many things related to organizing a conference. My experience in this particular domain has been rich. I formally got involved in organizing the conferences last about 3 years or so. But the first activity ever which I had done, that was during my BITS planning days, almost about 11 years back. And there as well, we were able to save good amount of money during those days, almost around 150,000 rupees, which we were able to save. So, and those are very, very successfully organized conferences. So it's a huge field. I'm very sure I would not be able to tell everything in this short span of time. It's already means 45 minutes since the time I have been speaking. So maybe I would request Professor Krishna to
Sure.
intervene now. And if somebody wants to really ask me any questions, I'd be more than glad to answer those questions.
Yeah, so good.
Yes,
Excellent.
over to
Thank you.
Professor Krishna.
Actually, that has been a fantastic webinar and discussion. This is very timely, as you said, because it's a place to exchange information, to learn from each other, and you said build relationships. And that's a very important point you made about building relationships.
Yeah.
Face to face is very important, and this helps us do that. And thank you for sharing your experiences, and in particular your involvement with IEEE is a great asset, and provides all the background that people need to know. And I'm sure the participants today's webinar have learned a lot from this. In fact, we have a special participant, Hans Hoyer, here. I'll make him a panelist if he wants to.
Hi, Professor Hans. I didn't know you were there.
Well, good evening, good morning. I did wake up and I came 10 minutes late, but I really, thank you, Krishna. I really want to congratulate. I just sent you an email to you, also to Archana and Krishna. This is an outstanding, what you've shared there. Please send to me. There's a lot to learn. I deeply appreciate your outstanding professionalism. I mean that sincerely, my friend.
Thank you so much, Professor Hans. It's good, Professor Krishna, you didn't tell me earlier, because otherwise I would have got very conscious that perhaps I would not have been able to say all those, but otherwise I might have been able to say. Thank you so much, Professor Hans, for waking up early and attending to this webinar. Thank you so much.
Let me just make another final comment, and Krishna,
Yes.
you and I can discuss further, the three of us, is what you've prepared. And as you know, we work together, we all interconnected, not only as colleagues, also as friends.
Yes.
I want to share this presentation with my dear friends in Cape Town, where we have our global conference in November of next year in Cape Town, South Africa. And the host there, Dean Sunil, a top professional, et cetera, he, I think, would really also appreciate seeing what you've done. I'm very impressed, very thoughtfully done. Thanks a lot, Krishna.
Thank you so much, Professor Hans, for your nice comments. It is always great to get encouragement from stalwarts like you, because you are the ones from whom I've learned so much. It is really good. Thank you so much.
Great. So let's see other folks comments from other participants. Look forward to that. We have a few minutes to do that. And one of the things that my personal comment is that most of our folks do not have any experience in project management, and this is something that even if you look at the NBA accreditation for graduates. One of the 12 attributes is project management, and I think even managing a conference is a project management issue. It's planning planning and implementing it, and all the various things that you mentioned requires actually some people to go through a course. And I think even in engineering colleges, I think we should also be having short courses on project management for our students, and particularly for administrators and faculty, because. But I've noticed in general in India, there tends to be a last-minute kind of rush. People
Correct.
think it's not, even though in principle, they start planning 1 year, 1.5 years in advance. They waste the first 1 year, just doing almost nothing. And then suddenly they realize, oh my God, we have to do all these things. And they start rushing. And when you have that rushing towards the end, the quality suffers because no planning has gone into it. So I think that is people who are in project management area, they understand that, and they give you, and there's lots of tools available, as you said. I think I like your tool that you mentioned about financial planning. You can maybe send me a copy of that, and I can.
I will do that. I will surely share that.
Maybe it will be useful for Sunil, for Cape Town. Maybe it will be useful for other people in this audience. All that would be fascinating.
I would be very, very glad to share that. I spent good amount of time. I think good amount of time in preparing that, but I would be very glad that if it is being used at other places also.
And I'm glad you took the time to prepare this presentation based on your interaction with IEEE. We have more than 30 people, but many they seem to be quiet. They haven't given any any indication they want to be.
That's okay. That's perfectly okay. Maybe they will write later or whatsoever.
Yeah, sure. That's definitely. But I think
may I make a comment?
Sure.
What comes to mind, my dear friends, is I'd like to also, perhaps we can have a separate call. Oh, of course, we'll be together in January. We can discuss it. I'd like to share this presentation, maybe make some adjustments with good friends and colleagues in places like in Africa, for example, and Latin America. And maybe do some modification culturally in the description. But I think that the groundwork you've done here through this presentation is quite first rate, really.
Yeah, and I think that the global IEEE quality shows up. But what you might want to do, Hans, is share this with your GEDC or IFES committee, and if somebody might want to take up the task of upgrading it to something that can be useful for a more general audience in GEDC or in
well, one of the things, as you know, both of you know, of course, and other friends that are listening, we just had, I've just been involved in the last 1 month in 3 conferences, one in Santiago, one in Beijing, of course, recently in Chennai. Each particularly one of the 3 of those conferences, I was just involved deeply, 25 hours a day, could deeply have benefited from your thoughtful analysis here, Rajneesh. And I just want to, and I really mean that. I really want what you said. This came up in the last meeting of the IFES Executive Committee also. So what did we learn, for example, this recent experience we had in Chennai, for example? And as we prepare, not only just in Cape Town for the next 3-4 years, and there are many kinds of conferences, some are only, for example, our GDC has a maximum of 200, while our WEF IFES can have over, as you mentioned, Dubai, we had 1,400 people there, so much more complex environments, as you know. So there's a lot. Very few people I've seen in this profession, per se, faculty, leaders, deans, such as you, have taken the time to do this kind of reflection. Very, very impressive. I'm very, really pleased. I'm glad I woke up, by the way.
Have you had your cup of coffee yet? A second cup?
I will. Thanks, President. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Hans, and thank you, Rajneesh, in particular, for taking the time and putting together this kind of a unique type of webinar. It's different from all the other ones that we've had, and I think it's been very useful to our participants. And with that, I will let everybody go back to their work as usual. And Jai Ho.
Jai Ho, sir.
Jai Ho.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Okay.
You know what Jai Ho means, right, Hans? Jai Ho means victory to all.
Yes, of course.
Have a great day ahead, Professor Krishna. Professor Hans, have a great day ahead. Right?
Yeah, the same.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.